My next patron question is from Zigaru, who wants to know about an alternate universe involving a possibly ill-fated acquisition. Given the recent news of Warner Brothers agreeing to be bought by Paramount Skydance, I can't help but feel like the Time Warner acquisition by AT&T led to this big butterfly effect, where Warner Brothers has been jumping from one owner to another. So my question would be, what if AT&T had never acquired Warner Brothers? Would Warner Brothers have thrived in the streaming era on their own, or would they still end up being bought by another company? Looking back at that acquisition, I definitely think Zigaru has a point that it started the road that led to the company and its other divisions becoming a target for Paramount Skydance. To provide some history, AT&T acquired Time Warner in 2018, but then decided to sell the company only a few short years later to let go of debt and because they wanted to focus primarily on their telecommunications operations. That resulted in Warner merging with Discovery, with the CEO, David Zaslav, then revamping Warner Brothers to put his stamp on it. That infamously included tax write-offs on completed and almost completed projects and constantly changing the name of the streaming service. To his credit, he did appoint Michael DeLuca and Pamela Abney to run Warner Brothers, and James Gunn and Peter Safran to run the DC Universe, and they've done a marvelous job, but those are the only compliments I can give him. It did not take long into his tenure for it to be obvious he wanted to sell the company for parts, and then make out with a nice golden parachute. And now we're stuck with the possibility of Warner Brothers being absorbed into Paramount, although it's still not a done deal yet, as there are still regulatory approvals to get through. And who knows what might happen under Warner Paramount, considering the absurd price CEO David Ellison is paying to acquire it, and the mountain of debt they'll be under. For all we know, Netflix just has to wait a few years, and they might get the studio and library after all, and at a discounted price. I do agree with Zigaru that things would have turned out a lot differently, and probably better had AT&T not bought Time Warner, although you actually have to go even further back into the company's history to understand why this happened. That would be none other than the ill-fated LL Time Warner merger. That was considered a bit of a disaster, and not the exciting merging of traditional and online media that the Time Warner executives had hoped for. They lost so much money from that, and even had to sell off parts of the company to deal with the debt. Jeff Bewkes, the Time Warner CEO at the time, was a big supporter of merging with AT&T, although he heard other offers too. Rupert Murdoch showed interest in buying Time Warner, which would have placed Warner Brothers and 20th Century Fox under the same roof, but it never happened. Bob Iger even expressed interest in merging with Warner. Yes, there was almost a reality where we would have seen DC and Marvel owned by the same company, but Bewkes was already having discussions with AT&T. The reason is that AT&T wanted to get into the media biz, and Bewkes thought AT&T's telecommunications arsenal would be a big help as they tried to get into streaming. Now, you would think Warner would have learned their lesson from the last time they merged with an internet provider, but I guess not. I think Time Warner should have taken advantage of the assets they already had to build themselves up and become a major media company. Having Warner Brothers Studios, Cartoon Network, CNN, HBO, DC Comics, and the classic Hanna-Barbera and MGM libraries is nothing to sneeze at. I look at how a company like Disney was able to become a massive corporation without anyone buying them. Instead, under the leadership of Frank Wells and Michael Eisner, they went from being considered one of the minor film studios to a major company by making smart business decisions, expanding into other areas, and eventually buying the ABC network. Funnily enough, Comcast did almost attempt a hostile takeover of Disney in the mid-2000s, not unlike what Paramount Skydance has been trying to do with Warner, but it thankfully did not happen. Time Warner had, at the time of the AT&T merger, way more than Disney had pre-ABC acquisition. Surely they could have used everything they had to prove their might and become a major force in the streaming world. Just the HBO name alone has a lot of value to people. Plus, like Disney, they have an incredible amount of characters beloved by people of multiple generations. So I think the AT&T merger was a short-sighted decision that only dragged them down further. In an alternate universe, they could have found their own Wells or Eisner type figure to really show the world what Time Warner was capable of at a time when media companies are fighting for eyeballs. Under smart leadership, they would have absolutely thrived. It's sad that lack of ambition eventually resulted in them possibly being gobbled up by another major studio. If they had never been bought by AT&T and remained an independent company with a CEO who actually had some vision and saw the incredible value of what they already had, we would certainly be reading different and rosier headlines about the company today. Thank you for your question, Zigaru.